I want to talk about how important it is to give, and it's obvious, but I'm going to approach it from a different place. I want to start by sharing a little story that was told to me by a long-standing member of our congregation, and it has to do with an old man by the name of Mr. Goldberg. Poor Mr. Goldberg has a chronic condition, and he finds himself in Mass General Hospital up in Boston for 3 weeks. And then he decides to leave Mass General and transfer to a different hospital. So he gets to the different hospital, and the social worker who is doing the intake there is curious, why did he leave Mass General and come to the hospital where the social worker was? How were the doctors at Mass General? Asks the social worker. And Mr. Goldberg starts to cry. Mr. Goldberg says the doctors at Mass General were phenomenal. Can't complain. And the social worker says, how were the nurses at Mass General? And Mr. Goldberg says, the nurses at Mass General were phenomenal. Can't complain. Mr. Goldberg, how was the food? Mr. Goldberg said the food was unbelievably delicious. Can't complain. The social worker is confused, says to Mr. Goldberg, so why did you leave that hospital to come here? And Mr. Goldberg says, because here I can complain. For centuries and centuries, people have complained. The children of Israel complained after they left Egypt that when God brought manna, they didn't like the food. They didn't think that it had enough variety. If you have ever been in a space with a lot of people and they are complaining about the food, you can understand that this is not a new complaint. And it creates a very negative dynamic because, of course, God is angry with the people and the people are angry with God, and Moses is complaining about the people. When does the complaining stop? It stops when the children of Israel are asked to give. That's when it stops. When they're taking and taking and taking, it's this isn't good enough, and why'd you take us out, and we were better off before, and they talk about Egypt like it was the Concord Hotel, reminiscing about the beautiful food that they used to eat there, which we know is not the case. They stop complaining when they are asked to give. Kol nediv lev, everybody asked to give out of the goodness of their hearts. So I want to spend a few moments saying that the whole dynamic changes when we are actually asked to give. Those of us who are sports fans, you sit and you watch and you have your snacks, and you say that one did the wrong thing and this one should have done something else and they should have had a different play, and if I were the quarterback, I would have created a different outcome. We have here a lot of young athletes. So Rex's friends, they actually play on teams. It's very different when you're on a team, when you have to throw the ball, when you have to make the play. All of a sudden, it's not so easy. All of a sudden, you might begin to understand that for professional athletes, it's a whole different story. That doesn't change until you go from being a consumer to being a participant when you start to give. Many of us go to see shows. We have here at Temple Israel, the Temple Israel players. These are people, they are not professional performers by and large. And they know that when you get up on stage, it's not so easy to actually sing, to remember your lines, to get all of the blocking right. And so the whole dynamic changes. We are going to be doing here at Temple Israel, you'll be hearing more about it, a rejuvenation project to freshen up our space. We're going to be turning to people and asking people in our congregation to give and to participate. And that changes the whole dynamic because we are not just at that point consumers, we are participants. So I want to take us now to a really important space because there is so much complaining that occurs intergenerationally. So the older generation says, the younger generation, they just sit around. and they're not very devoted. And the younger generation says the older generation, they are maybe too inflexible. In the United States, right here, we are watching the younger generation on college campuses that are doing us so proud. Jewish students that are able to speak out against the anti-Semitism which is rising. And instead of looking at them and saying, a bunch of kids, we should look at them and say, wow, when they go from the spectator space to the participant space, when they are starting to give of their passion and of their knowledge, wow, how impressed we are. It is a game changer when we move into the space of giving. And certainly a younger generation here has shown that they have what to give. In Eretz Yisrael, older generation will look at the younger generation of soldiers and say, when I was in the army, it was a whole different thing. This new generation, they just don't have what it takes. Time and again, the older soldiers in Israel are pointing to this generation and saying, wow, do they have what it takes? Because they are giving day in and day out, and they are risking their lives. So I want us all to think about, each and every one of us, that space where we are critical because we're on the receiving end. We're watching a show. We're eating a meal, and it is so easy. We each think about, the next Yelp entry that we're going to create. TripAdvisor is depending on us to write the perfect review. Go for it. But then shift to a space where you are giving. Shift to the space where you now have to step in and give it your all. It is easy to complain. I urge us to find our nidiv lev, our place of graciousness that comes from our hearts, and I assure you, the whole dynamic will start to change. Shabbat Shalom.